Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this special webinar, Habit Stacking for Chronic Illness. I'm Kalen Young, the Director of Corporate Affairs here at the Arthritis National Research Foundation. Today, we're going to explore a simple yet powerful concept, how small, consistent habits built into your daily routine can make a big difference in managing arthritis and autoimmune disease. First, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our generous sponsor, Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine, for making this session possible, and all of you for being here today. If you've ever felt overwhelmed trying to stay on top of medications, diet and exercise, stress management, and more, you're not alone. That's where habit stacking comes in. It's a science-backed approach to making changes feel more doable by attaching new habits to routines you already have. You'll hear from experts in behavioral science, clinical care, and from someone who lives with arthritis every day. We hope this conversation leaves you feeling empowered with ideas and tools to support your health without adding stress. We'll start with Tiffany Fair, a nurse with over 25 years of experience across nearly every corner of the healthcare world, from pediatrics and acute care to community health and long-term care. She's worked her way up the nursing ladder from CNA to BSN and now serves as a manager in a long-term care setting where she blends leadership with a passion for patient care. Let's take a deeper look into the science behind habit stacking. Please join me in welcoming Tiffany Fair, BSN.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tiffany Fair, and as you already know, I've been working for years, many years, but let's talk about habit stacking and what habit stacking really is. So habit stacking means linking a new habit to something that you already do every day. It builds routines faster by piggybacking on existing habits. It's a technique where you attach a new helpful habit, again, to something you do every day. For example, every day you brush your teeth. So let's say today we're going to set our medicine next to our teeth, brush it. So now we're going to brush our teeth and take our medication. Then we're going to form a habit. That is habit stacking. It makes routines feel automatic and easier to stick with or to remember. And this works very good for chronic conditions such as arthritis or any other autoimmune condition. So let's talk about how these habits are formed. Again, habits are routines or behaviors that become automatic through repetition. Our brains form habits through a loop, which is a cue, a routine, and a reward. Our brain craves a consistent pattern. These rewards are simple things as far as taking your medicine every day, not having any pain, stretching every day, not having those body aches, feeling more loose. These tiny changes build momentum over time. So let's talk about habit stacking ideas. James Clear popularized the term habit stacking, which is an author of Atomic Habits. And then Dr. Fogg, also a behavior scientist, was a creator of the tiny habits method, which involves attaching a new habit to an existing routine. He felt that these small, consistent changes would lead to existing behaviors that were lasting. Some of the tips that I think would be helpful is, again, after brushing your teeth, maybe putting your medications next to them. Charging your phone. We all charge our phone at night. So if we were to charge our phone and put our medications next to those, we're stacking a habit. We're going to charge our phone and then take our medications. Every day we take showers. Taking our daily shower, we're going to get out. We're going to either put on our deodorant or our lotion. So maybe putting some of our creams that we need to help eliminate some of these symptoms that we're having next to our lotion or our deodorant is going to help us. And in the end, our reward. So that's stacking habits. When we go to our provider, to our doctor's appointments, we're going to have to let him know if these medications or any of the little simple things that he gave you to try to manage these symptoms are working. So maybe next to our coffee cup, we'll put a journal. Every day, we're going to know we're drinking our coffee, we're writing in our journal, again, those are habit stacking habits. You want to build upon those. It takes 3 days to make a habit. So doing these tiny little gestures every day and adding them into our everyday things that work for you, is going to make it easier for you to control the symptoms that may come with your conditions. So this helps very well with chronic conditions. It helps keep your habits manageable and consistent, and improves follow through with medications. Setting an alarm on your phone to remind you to take your medication, or to drink a full glass of water, which is important with certain medications. These are all going to be helpful hints that you can add on to, again, habit stacking. Reducing the overwhelm for people managing pain, fatigue, or brain fog. It creates a structure that you're not thinking about. It's just going to be something that becomes a form of habit. And that's what you want to kind of do when managing your chronic conditions. So my final thought is, you don't need motivation, just better symptoms. Symptoms that we've all created within ourselves as far as a habit, whether it be charging your phone and taking your medicine, brushing your teeth, putting on your pajamas to remind you to stretch at night, and laying a little exercise pad next to your bed so you remember. These small habits together create real change, and they're going to help you in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for that insightful breakdown. So I want to do a quick housekeeping comment. So don't forget to drop your questions in the Q&A box below. We'll get to as many as we can when we come to the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Now let's hear how this approach can be used in a clinical setting. I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Timothy Niewold. Dr. Niewold is a physician scientist at the Hospital for Special Surgery and a pioneer in understanding the genetic causes of autoimmune disease, like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. He's also a proud ANRF alumni and a current member of our board of directors. So Dr. Niewold, we've worked with countless patients over the years. How have you seen daily habits make a difference in managing chronic illness?
Hi, that's a great question, and thanks to the ANRF for having me on this panel. Um, a lot of the care of chronic illness comes down to these daily habits, I'll say. So, I mean, one of the most striking examples in the clinic is medication use, and it's difficult. I'll admit, for myself and for most people, if you have to introduce a new daily medication, or even harder, a twice or 3 times a day medication, it's very difficult. And it's natural to miss doses. And this is a great example, I think, of that Tiffany already brought up, about how to try to incorporate this with your existing habits to make sure there's some way that you can remind yourself and keep going. You know, our twice a day medications, there are quite a few that we use in arthritis and autoimmune disease, and they are important to control disease. And it's very easy, especially to miss the afternoon dose, but even the morning dose can be hard. So I think that this example was referenced already by Tiffany, that, you know, if there's a morning ritual that you do, whether it be brushing your teeth, something you do in your morning time consistently every day. The afternoon I found very difficult, actually, because many times our afternoons are different on different days. If we're at work, if we're not at work, if we're doing something. So sometimes I think if there's some little reward that you like maybe if you like having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea in the afternoon or something like that, trying to tie it to that, or maybe even just setting an alarm or some intentionality where you sort of have on your phone, say, an alarm that goes off at 3 o'clock every day and gives you a little buzz in your pocket. And you think, okay, it's medication time. But it's difficult, but the consistency that you can achieve with habit stacking can be very helpful in managing chronic illness and to keep you consistent with your medication so you get the most benefit.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think the afternoon, that's a really good point. It's a time where we don't have some of the regular habits of setting an alarm is really helpful, knowing that that's, you know, that's the time to stack on those habits. So what does habit stacking look like from a clinical care perspective? Like, are you seeing this approach incorporated into patient care from the clinical side?
I think it's nice to have this concept there. I'll say that yeah, I think it's a newer concept. This might date me, but but I think it's something that maybe we latched into a little bit in clinical medicine before we even named it specifically. I think it's better to have it named specifically so that we can consciously attend to this and try to do it, you know. So I think that you know, the way the medication example that I just gave is one that comes up right front of mind right away because that's one of those things where you have to be consistent every day, but it does apply, I think, in a lot of other areas. And I think clinically, we would think about this, for example, in the case of getting some regular exercise with arthritis. Many types of arthritis will benefit from some light, non heavy weight bearing type of activities, and it can seem a little bit counterintuitive sometimes if your joints hurt. But in many of our types of arthritis, you know, check with your physician about your specific condition and abilities. But I think there's a documented evidence of maintaining your muscle mass and your bone density from doing some kind of light activity. So there again, habit stacking can be good if there's just something. Let's say if it's, you know, you get a break at lunchtime and you take a walk maybe instead of, you know, just, you know, sort of scrolling through online news or other things, you know, and you sort of like set an intention, say, I'm going to take a quick walk or I'm going to do a flight of stairs or two, you know, just to get a little bit of aerobic activity in the middle of the day. I think this technique can definitely apply to things like exercise and I think diet as well. And diet would probably look more like you know, maybe trying to incorporate a healthy food choice, you know, using something around what you do in the evening when you're preparing meals, you know, trying to sort of set an intention that you'll think about it and then see if you know, maybe there's some substitute. I recommend always starting small, you know, so all of these things work best. And I think Tiffany introduced this, that these are small things attached to other small things, you know, and then when they stack up, they can become a big thing, but just start small because big change usually doesn't hold. I think we've learned that in the clinical setting as well, over and over, I would say. Maybe big diets are a good example. If someone tries to undertake an enormous diet change all at once, it rarely sticks. You know, those are the things that you do for a week and then you just can't keep doing it. So I also like the gradual approach here of stacking small changes on top of other small changes. And I think that's something that can be clinically very helpful. And you just be surprised maybe at where you can get to by doing this over time.
Yeah. Well, speaking of big changes, flare-ups and fatigue can often derail even the best of intentions.
Mhm.
What advice do you give patients for adopting routines when they're not feeling their best?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a little bit of a hard one to answer because there are some times where it's bad enough that, you know, if I sat here and told you, well, try to do something, you would say it's just not happening today. Like I can't do it. So there's a middle road. You know, you don't want to force yourself through really bad pain because it just won't work. You know, but if you find what is often very common also is sort of an achy day. You know, say you're in bed and you're thinking, "Ooh, this might be a little tough." You know, if you as long as it's not debilitating, if you can push through some of the initial inertia, often you'll feel a lot better. And this happens to people with arthritis or people without arthritis. You know, it's some of these days you wake up and you think, oh gosh, I'm not going to the gym this morning. If you can do it, you'll usually feel like, boy, I'm really happy I did that, you know, but it takes this kind of foresight and it might take a little bit of this habit reflex also, where you sort of have it ingrained and you say, okay, I know I'm not feeling great, but this is my habit. This is what I do. I'm going to go do it. If it doesn't go well, I can always stop, you know, and I'll just come back, but at least I tried, you know. So I think some of this intention setting that you get from habit stacking and in general, the intention that comes with habits, or even if it's not intention, this kind of automatic sort of a thing, you know, where you say, well, that's just what I do. That can be helpful to get you through some tough times. It's not enough, you know, and again, in a big flare up, it's difficult. But I think if you build that backbone, it's a little easier to sort of overcome this. And it's not so much a question. It's like, okay, well, this is what I do though. So I know it's a little tough, but this is what I do every day and I can do it, you know, and maybe just that it almost reinforces itself. I think when you realize it's okay, I've done this every day for the last month, I can do it today, you know. So these little changes, you know, positive habits tend to feed forward and build on themselves. So if you can stick with it, you know, and again, taking small things, you know, so that it's easier to do, it'll make changes. And then if you feel like you can stack something else after that, then go for it. But not a rush. So I think even within the context of flare-ups and difficult days, it won't always work. But if you have good habits ingrained, you'll be a little more likely to be able to kind of get through it in a better way, I think. We've noticed that with arthritis, sitting still doesn't always help it. It's difficult. It's an unfair cycle that also when you get immobile, sometimes the joints actually hurt a little bit more, and then it's this kind of vicious cycle in the other way. So when it's possible, we recommend people try to kind of break out of that if they can.
Absolutely. So here's kind of building on that. What would be some of the first habits you would suggest for people dealing with so many stages of a disease and unexpected flares, etc.? So where is a good place to start that you've seen be effective in terms of like what are those first habits on those days when you might not get to the gym again because it is a vicious cycle, or you might not get to go on a walk? Where would you suggest patients start?
Yeah, I think with respect to physical activity, I think committing to do something is, even if it's just, walk around the house, or something where, or stretching. Stretching is also very good. Even if you're not feeling like you want to do a lot of weight bearing, even if you can do some seated stretching or some seated motion, if you sort of simple things like moving your legs up and down as you're watching TV or reading a book, something like that, where you carry the intention of being physically active to where it can go that day. So you do have to listen to your body. I'm not recommending that you push through bad pain or anything because that's not wise either. But finding those edges where you can still do something, I think that's a way instead of abandoning altogether. I think if you can find that you can. I think it feels good because you accomplished your intention and you also listened to your body and you were able to do something that'll often make you feel a little bit better. I think in general, other first places to start, we often recommend the habit stacking for medication use because that's one of the big things when we're trying to get disease under control. Even if it's new diagnosis, but even established diagnosis, when you flare up, it's really important that, if you're given medicine to treat the flare up, that you can really stay on it. Otherwise that's a vicious cycle where if you're not getting your doses in because you're feeling bad, then yikes, that's trouble because we're hoping the medicine's going to help. So that's another important time where you can lean into this habit. Hopefully you've developed where if you have a flare up and you get something, say you get a short course of another medicine to sort of knock it out, then you really stay on it. And many times that goes okay because you know that the medicine's going to help you and you're reminded constantly by your condition that you want to take it, but it is really important. So those are some kind of basics, I think. And again, having worked on it when you're feeling well will help you stick with it when you're not feeling so well.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Niewold. It's so helpful to see how this works, not just in theory, but in real patient care. Our next guest is Denise Graef, a certified trainer and someone who has been living with rheumatoid arthritis for many years. She brings a valuable perspective on how to build habits that stick, even when dealing with pain, fatigue, and unpredictability, just as we were talking about. So, Denise, can you tell us a bit about your experience living with RA and how you first started using habit stacking?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to echo a lot of what Dr. Niewold just talked about, but my habit stacking is more in lifestyle.
Yeah.
So, because lifestyle, we all go to sleep at night, we get up every day. I've had RA over 40 years. And my diagnosis was over 40 years ago when there wasn't as much known as there is now. Super thankful for this forum and the connections we can make, the research that happens, the physicians that work on it, because now you don't have to feel like you're on an island, which is very much how I felt. So a lot of trial and error for me. So my journey has been older teens when I had symptoms. I was an athlete. So I already had kind of hardwired habit stacking because of self-discipline being an athlete, and how I was raised in you better make your bed before you leave the house, those kinds of things, or those little lifestyle things. But for me, I think starting with the length of time that I've had RA, and really trying to dial in what treatment was going to work. And does this mean I can't move my body anymore? And I have rheumatoid arthritis, and I have the worst kind of rheumatoid arthritis. And so realizing, I think when I started habit stacking in this new life was breathing, honestly, in the mornings, waking up and trying to calm my nervous system. Because what I noticed over the years is a type A personality, and as an athlete, the more high strung I was, the more pain receptors turned on and I could feel more pain. But when I calmed down, not as intense. So I learned to breathe. I learned first thing in the morning, calming the breath, and thinking about the things I was thankful for. And then the little patterns of moving my ankles before I stood up, slowly moving my head, practical things, moving my wrists because I knew I was going to get out of bed. And with that breathing, with calming the nervous system, beginning to move the small joints first and then the bigger ones before I even put my feet on the floor.
Absolutely. So it kind of leads directly into our next question, which was, what are a few examples of routines that have really helped you? So I heard breathing, but can you give some examples of what that looks like for our patient audience and caregivers to help with that habit stacking?
So it is, I think, medications are a big deal. For me, it's not the time for medications, as Dr. Niewold brought up. If you're in pain, I need something for pain. It's like a no-brainer. But every single day, I have a similar routine that I follow is the breathing to calm the nervous system, the moving the joints that, hey, I can still move. And you're kind of checking in with yourself. How am I feeling? No matter how good I'm feeling or how bad I'm feeling, if there's a flare, I'm going to move. Being immobile is not your friend. Mobility is our friend. And that is just a fact. Circulation, you're getting nutrients to the connective tissue. And those of us with RA know that connective tissue is attacked. So the more hydration and movement we can get, the better we're going to feel. Again, echoing what Dr. Niewold said, that just even if it doesn't look the same way it may have looked yesterday, it still has to look some way today. So for me, I move first thing in the morning. I breathe. I do light stretching before I do anything, even before I brush my teeth. And then I go and brush my teeth. So hopefully I'm answering your question. So
Yeah.
the movement, the brushing the teeth, and then for me, I ingest protein first thing. I drink it just to establish hydration.
That's wonderful. And I know not every idea works. And I think you kind of alluded to this too, especially with your background in sports and having a type A personality and wanting everything to work all at one time and then realizing there are certain limitations. But what's one thing that didn't stick necessarily? And what did you learn from it?
Running.
Okay.
I stopped running. So I love that. It's high impact. What I learned from it was, even though I love movement like I do, and I realize that not everybody does, but it's necessary for life. It's how we do get from point A to point B. Um, I learned that even though on the inside I knew I really wanted something, I knew that high impact was not a great idea. And so what I learned from it was, though, that I could still have my itch scratched. So how could I, instead of, okay, running is off the table for me, but what can I do to get the similar feeling that running gave for me? And that's what I did. So what I learned from it was kind of crowding out something bad, like we do with dietary issues. Like, okay, I know that highly processed food is probably not going to be great later in my joints. What could I have instead that might scratch the itch that will actually I won't pay for later? So,
Right.
yeah.
That's wonderful. So that's actually again, you've kind of served up all of these great commentary. But what advice would you offer to someone just starting out that's going to start habit stacking and maybe doesn't know all of those like oops points yet where you might come into conflict with your own like scratching the itch or other?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, you're hearing something that has been said. Don't try to do a lot of things at once.
Yeah.
We eat an elephant one bite at a time. And for consistency is number one, the most important thing. Consistency in any habit, lifestyle change. You're flossing. It's not that fun, but we need to do it for dental health, which is also systemic. But just thinking about for the new person, or you are new to the battlefield, as it were, just change one thing, maybe two, and just begin with that consistent basis. For me, if I add something new that I know is going to benefit me, I go a week before I even dream about doing something else. It needs to be an established where it's kind of an unconscious competency. Like I already know that I'm going there. And so, yeah, I would say start small and be patient. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Denise. It's incredibly powerful to hear how you've made this all work in your real life. Now we'll bring back everyone together for a short panel discussion on applying habit stacking in everyday life. I'll start with a few questions and then we'll open it up to our Q&A. So the first question to the whole panel is, what's one habit stack you've seen or used that surprised you with how effective it was?
For me, I would say is the setting the cell phone alarm. I have medication that I take daily and I'm terrible at it. So I've even had my patients doing that. I set my alarm and it goes off because I keep my phone in my hand, as we all do now. And, I just go ahead and remember to take my medication when I do that. No matter what time of day it is, if that alarm's going off and I know I'm not sleeping to wake me up, then it's telling me I need to take my medicine.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Denise, how about you?
I make sure I move every 30 minutes. I'm getting
Oh,
up, standing up. On the clinical side of like blood sugar and such, because with autoimmune, your sugars can run high. I usually after a meal, I will move or go for a little walk for like 10 minutes just to digest, loosen up. And it's become a lifestyle for me.
yeah. Dr. Niewold?
Yeah, I've found the morning routine suggestions that Tiffany brought these up in her talk. I think I'm impressed with how successful that is, and it's a nice way, I think, to bring people into this idea of habit stacking because I don't know, it's a time of day it's before we go to work, and we often have some kind of routine, and so that's I've been surprised at how well you can latch into that, for someone who hasn't tried this before, and at least get the morning medicines down, and then after that, you start working on the harder stuff like afternoon doses and things like that. But that one seems to be a good starting point where someone can really kind of get it and see the effectiveness of it for themselves.
Yeah. So what are your favorite tools or tricks for remembering your habit stacks? Denise, do you have any?
I'm on autopilot. I've been doing it for so long. Because I'm not reward based really. I'm just I like systems. I love how Tiffany brought that up about systems. It's so great having a system, and I thrive on systems. So if I have a plan in place, I'm going to work my plan.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that a lot of people actually, the reward thing is big for them, no matter how little or how big that reward is. So, with my patients, I've always attached something with a reward, even with a diet change or if it's exercise. Because at the end of the day, the reward is getting rid of the pain. As Denise said, getting rid of the stiffness, that is your reward. So find something small that's rewardable to attach that to so that you get the bigger reward at the end.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I already gave away my morning routine thing, but I think the what Denise brought up too about physical activity, if you can have some kind of regular commitment to some even minimal level of physical activity, that's been a favorite of mine because I've noticed it's really common to get into this loop of immobility. It's even subconscious, I think, honestly. Things hurt and you don't consciously think about I'm going to move less. You just kind of move less. I mean, that's just human nature. So fighting that can be hard. And I think you need to set some conscious intention. And so I think this habit stacking, whatever it may be, like the phone alarm, I think like you guys have mentioned, that's great, or something else to sort of build that in so that it's not a choice or even a subconscious choice that your body's sort of making for you, because it's very common to see people slide into a much lower level of activity and they may not even notice, and then maybe ask their spouse, did they used to move that? Oh yeah, a couple of years ago we used to do all these physical things, and sometimes the patient's shocked this, wait a minute, I guess so, I never thought of it, but so I think that's another area where there can be a real benefit. I'm surprised how well it can work just because it brings it to the conscious level and you can think, okay, yeah, that's right, I got to move and it's going to help me feel better and maintain my muscle mass and all those things. So that's another one of my favorites, I think, with this approach.
Yeah. So are there any routines that are particularly helpful, especially during a flare or a high symptom day, that we can give for patients? I know we've talked a lot about that, about kind of scaling it back and having it ingrained, but are there any in particular that come to mind when you think about days when you're really in pain?
I'll answer that.
Yeah.
I like shower, warm to hot. I call hot soap, careful, don't burn yourself. But warm shower for circulation. And I'll do self massage and gentle range of motion in the shower, especially on the harder days. And once I notice the circulation improves, the pain lessens. For me, that's huge. So that gentle movement on those days, if it's just stuck, it's just going to be one of those days. Maybe more self-massage, light, gentle range of motion exercises that have been brought up too. And I think really and truly, especially with rheumatoid, that I can't stress the importance of range of motion exercises because that lack of movement used to be called the shrinking, right? The wasting disease, because we draw in with pain. And that's the last thing we really need to do. We need to actually open up and work range of motion in all of the joints, which can be challenging. But once that is initiated, the pain actually subsides somewhat. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Dr. Niewold, do you have one that's particularly good for painful days?
Yeah, I think I mean I echo what Denise said. I think when you work with what you got that day, you have to listen to your body, but doing something is really important. And I really like that stretching, range of motion. Sometimes you don't want to set it up in your mind that, well, if I can't go for a 30-minute walk or go for a light jog, then I can't do anything. That's you want to go the opposite way and say that's okay. Like that's not happening today. No big deal. I got to do something else. And just be mindful that you anything you do really does help. And I think I guess I said this already, but I think trying to work on it when you're in your good days does really make a difference. It's hard to do. It's going to be hard to start this if you're really feeling in some of your worst days, but you can kind of build up this muscle, this kind of memory muscle in your good days, and then it can help serve you in your tough days. And just that little push, even if you don't know why, it's just like, well, this is just what I do. I'll just do it. That's great. That's wonderful. It becomes a little more automatic, and that's where you want to get to, because then it'll be hard to talk yourself out of it. And just little things make a big difference. So whatever you can do that day, it will be better than nothing for sure. So.
I like to say, dig your well before you're thirsty. So
Yeah.
practicing that on the good days. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's great. Tiffany, how about you? Do you have any suggestions for routines that are particularly helpful on painful days?
Yeah, I would just say also meditation and relaxing after the movement or before the movement, because sometimes a lot of it is mental, right? So you're in this pain, you're in this mind that I can't do anything, there's nothing I can do. So as Denise was saying, breathing, doing that breathing so that you're able to move, and then taking those small movements, even if it's just walking around in your house or just standing up from your seat and doing a few stretches. I always tell my patients, stretch when a commercial's on. That's the
Yeah.
best. That's one thing that you can do. No, you don't want to exercise. I get it. But when a commercial comes on, there's 3 to 5 minutes in commercials. You won't even notice it because you want to get past the commercials. So stand up, do a few stretches there, then sit back down and enjoy your show. By the time you've watched an hour show, 30 minutes of the hour, you've done some stretches.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wonderful advice. And what I'm also hearing is that this is also kind of there's a very significant mental component to this, right? Of, hey, I'm going to take a shower. I'm not going to pull into the pain. I'm going to take up space. I'm going to stretch even when I don't want to. I think that's great advice, and really centering your mind. It seems like with the breathing and meditation, that can really help, especially establish some of those habits in small but very significant ways. Wonderful. So what's a question that you wish that patients asked about building or maintaining habits? Like, what's something that doesn't you wish they would ask, and maybe doesn't always come up in those spaces? Tiffany, do you have that often?
Yes, a lot, especially when I taught at some of the health community centers.
Mhm.
A lot of them didn't even know where to start.
Yeah.
So I would actually create plans for them because they didn't know what to ask. It
Yeah.
was more, they didn't understand the disease process.
Yeah.
So until they understand what that process is, they don't know what to ask. As the doctor was saying, sometimes it becomes something that you're not doing those small things. You're waiting for it to get to that point. Now you're running to the doctor saying, what do I do? What do I do? Because they don't know to take those small steps. So I think us as healthcare providers, we have to get them to those steps and start it off at the beginning, telling them how to habit stack. You know,
Yeah.
I used to tell my patients, I'm going to give you one thing to work on, and I want you to pick what the easiest thing is for you, because the hardest one is always going to be the hardest. But if you pick that one thing, such as the stretching, everybody can say stretching. If I pick medication first, they're going to automatically say no. So let's get with the stretching. Then once they see that that's actually helping, then let's move on to the next thing and add that in. So, like I said, a lot of the patients just don't know what to ask because they don't understand. So, educating them on the disease process usually helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Niewold, do you have a specific question, or similarly to what Tiffany was saying, ways to help and start the conversation with your patients to help support them in starting some of the habit stacking?
Yeah, I think it's important, as everyone's mentioned, to start small, and so and like Tiffany just said, to kind of to come up with something practical, try to brainstorm a little bit with the patient about what might work with them. So there's sort of there's a thing to do. I think that's really important. And then I try to mention a little bit about how it's still going to be difficult and some of the mental piece too. I mentioned that it is easy to slide into immobility because that's just our human nature. When it hurts, when you move something, your brain says, well, don't move that, and so
Yeah.
it's very logical, and we don't even really think of it with our logical mind, but to try to, and I really like the suggestions of breathing and meditation and trying to kind of, to just be with it for a little bit. And I think sometimes you can find a way to think, okay, it's not so bad, like it hurts, but I can do this little thing, and it's taking little steps. Sometimes pain, the emotional part of pain, can be overwhelming too, and then that's bad because it just adds to the physical pain, and you get in this kind of a loop where you're worried about the pain, and then the pain comes and it sort of keeps going. So I think some of the relaxation and breathing techniques and meditation can help break that circuit a little bit, where you just say, I'm just going to be calm, I'm just going to breathe, I'm just going to let these thoughts go. And then that could be a good preface. I think that's great from both Denise and Tiffany. Those are great suggestions, for things that you can do first. And so people don't ask, I try to mention that. So it's not just kind of a checkbox thing like, okay, I have another to-do list. Okay, check this, and then I'll go on, because it's just not always that simple. When you're
Yeah.
faced with it, when you're laying there in your bed in the morning, you might need some other tools. So I think addressing that with people can be good, and they may not bring it up, especially in a doctor's office visit. You don't usually talk about stuff like that. It's the traditional doctor's office is kind of like, okay, do this, do that. Okay, thanks. See you later. But that's not real life. That's not how it goes after you get home.
Right. Denise, do you have any suggestions from a patient perspective of things that you can bring to healthcare providers and in support of your efforts to habit stack?
Yeah, it's tricky from a patient perspective because I'm actually a case study and I have my clients that I work with. So, but from my perspective, I've learned out of respect for the time of the medical practitioner to have questions that I have written down so that I don't walk out the door and go, "Duh, forgot to ask that." I think for and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for a clinician or a physician to you're talking the habit stacking, yes, for medications and lifestyle is a whole nother ball. And that's what I do. I'm the movement professional and a health coach. So I go, all right, well, let's look at the other pieces. You have your doctor who's guiding you as a team through this medication. And I work in teams with physical therapists to work with patients to get them that feel stuck, right? And so from that perspective, it is the small steps of when you do this, you're going to feel the benefit, the payoff. When that happens with that consistency, success breeds success. Then they want more because you're building something.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds to me also like I'm hearing kind of undertones of there's a need to have grace for yourself as a patient and when you're going through that and a little bit of forgiveness. Do you have any recommendations around like what that looks like in practice, especially when you are having those off days?
Yes. For me, it's more realizing that I'm not a superhero, even if I have a cape. That for me, I think one of the toughest things was setting boundaries to be okay to say I'm not going to be able to do that today. That's just not going to be the best. I could probably pony up and do it, but then I pay for 3 days. And someone with RA, if they're new to it, they learn that it's kind of a ebb and flow of how paying attention and being okay with how you feel and not getting critical. There's always that self-criticism and a little bit of shame that comes with a diagnosis. And I think, what did I do wrong, right? And to allow somebody to see that you did nothing wrong and that you could take this one day at a time, be okay with who you are, and do what you can do. And that's really the end of it.
Tiffany, do you have any other comments about that from all the patient population you've worked with or in your own experience?
I would just say, everybody is different. Everybody's symptoms are different. They're going to come differently. So what works for one may not work for all. So, I would say just speaking with your nurse or your provider and, sitting down together, trying to figure out what works best for you. And that's the biggest thing, because like I said, it doesn't work for all. I've dealt with all different populations, and what one might understand, the other one might not. And their symptoms may be totally different. So now we have to think of what's going to work for them, what's going to help them habit stack. Maybe the person doesn't take their shower every day or maybe it's something they don't do every day because of their culture or their background. So what can we tie to it for their culture and their background that they do every day? And that's talking with the patient just to see, hey, if you're tired, what can you do? Because maybe they can't do as much as the next person.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Niewold, do you have any comment?
Yeah, I agree with all that's been said. I think that's in the doctor's office. These are really valuable conversations to have, but they don't always happen, So it's when you're first getting to know each other, it's a new diagnosis or something, then there's a lot to deal with. But I've found that after I've known people for a while, this is really where the rubber hits the road, honestly, is, how do you work with this over time? And dealing with chronic illness is a lot of what we've been talking about today, and as Tiffany pointed out, everybody's different. And so until you talk about it and find out what's working and what's not, then it's harder to get people better. It's simple to write a prescription, say, here you go, and then people don't take it. It's not going to do anything, and same for exercise or same for other things. You could recommend exercise, say, hey, this is good for you. That doesn't go anywhere until you sort of figure out how to really work it into somebody's life. And so, but I think that's a satisfying part when you see people have success with this. It's amazing, because they really do start feeling better. And that's often when you can affect some change, so I think that's, I guess, for, I think hopefully most physicians will do this. I think that's really important. And I think from the patient side, I just encourage everybody to be very upfront about this, like, how do we make this work in my life? Like, you gave me this prescription. If you're having trouble taking it, just, say, I'm having trouble taking this. This schedule doesn't work for me. I don't know what to do. How can we fix this? And hopefully get some good suggestions, because this is, I think, it's a big part of clinical medicine, is how to help people make the changes that help them.
Help them. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, now we'd like to open up to all of our Q&A. So please, we have several questions already in our Q&A box. It's at the bottom of your screen. So please just keep submitting and we will answer as many as we can. So one of our first questions is, are there any specific daily habits I should be building to support my autoimmune disease? So I think we've talked about several of them, but again, kind of that baseline of what are those specific habits? Denise, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, the habits probably building in would be the calming your nervous system, especially if you're a woman. We have cortisol and that, and there's all that. That's a whole nother podcast, I think, or a whole nother thing. But but just that kind of checking in with yourself, I think, is a great a habit to adhere to. And hydration. Hydration, no matter what the condition is, I think, important, and movement. And of course, I sound like an echo because I'm going to say those things all the time. Movement.
Yeah. So kind of piggybacking on that, the second question we received this is a question specifically, again, to Denise, but what about any habits to deal with fatigue and exhaustion when you kind of get to that point of overwhelm and just...
That's a real thing. Yeah. And that is, as I've lived through that, I have been able to build endurance, but there are still times when the body is busy. And the body is busy, the resources are used up, and you just have to be okay with a nap, a rest, meditation that was brought up. Just something that is restful. It doesn't have to be sleep, although there's a lot of repair that happens when we sleep. But that there's no like magic pill for the energy. It's part of the disease. If you have some of the autoimmune diseases that have that, which rheumatoid is one of them, I have supplemented B vitamins, stress B vitamins, and that has helped me. And I guess everybody's different. So seeing your provider, talking to your provider, maybe, and asking about a nutritionist or dietitian to talk with, to speak with, to see how that might work for the individual. Yeah.
Dr. Niewold, do you have any comments on that specifically, especially like the supplements or talking to your physician about how do we address fatigue and exhaustion?
Yeah, I agree with Denise. You do have to listen to your body. There's some days where it's just not going to happen as far as doing a lot of exercise, and that's or physical activity. But I really like the suggestion of doing something restful. Then listening to that, and then trying to either take a nap or meditate. I think I'll admit that a lot of our medications in autoimmune disease don't address fatigue and exhaustion very well. It's been a consistent frustration for physicians and patients alike, is that we can treat some other parts of the disease better then we can treat that with medication. Unfortunately, it's not universal. So sometimes when you can treat the underlying autoimmune process better, then the fatigue gets better, but it's not always. So that's hard, So then we start to think about the other non-medicine type of approaches, which there are quite a few. Again, for that terrible day, that's probably just going to be a terrible day. And that's just like Denise. So some of them you just have to accept and say it's okay. It's going to get better. Today I'm going to take it easy. For the in-between days where you're a little bit fatigued, sometimes some of this either light activity, doing something to freshen things up and try something different, even if it feels a little, even if you have some internal resistance, whether if you're a little fatigued but you have a break and you can take a walk out, out on a nice day, something like that can be good. Some meditation and mindfulness can sometimes be helpful too, I think, where you can try to it doesn't have to be physically active, but you're kind of mentally focusing, and sometimes people can pull some vitality from that as well, and even a little bit of pain relief sometimes. If you get into it, sometimes people have noticed this, that they can actually focus away from some of the sort of chronic pain cycles that occur. So I think it's is difficult, and I think it's still an area in the part of medicine, dealing with prescription medications, that there's a lot of room for improvement, because we are disappointed many times in how a treatment can work for some parts of disease and leave the fatigue still fairly strong, unfortunately. Generally I recommend some of the non-pharmacologic methods to go along with medication in this case.
Wonderful. So Tiffany, this is a question I think you can really help with, is how do you avoid burnout when trying to build better routines?
As we said before, picking one thing at a time and figuring out what that one thing is that works for you, no matter how small or how large it is. The 3 M's, your mood, because your mood is going to drive everything. As both of them have said, if you're not feeling good and feeling up to it, then what's going to make you do it, right? So you want to make sure you're addressing your mood, and then of course your movement, because if you're not moving around, you're going to stiffen up, and that's what's going to cause the pain, which both of those are going to have you where you're not taking your medication properly. So I call it my 3 M's. So you want to make sure you're adjusting and you're doing all 3 of those, but you're picking one of those at a time. And of course, so for your first week or so, you're going to do those, and, write it down in your journal. If you don't do a journal, because I'm not good with doing that, do a text, send something to your doctor. That way you're keeping up with what you're doing and what is happening with that. Is it a positive effect, a negative effect for what you're doing? And then once you've accomplished that, then let's piggyback and stack on top of that and add something else that's small. And it doesn't have to be, oh, I'm going to take my 30 pills every day. We're going to say, okay, I'm going to take my pill for my arthritis today with my breakfast every morning. And then maybe you can start adding on the rest of those to add on every day. It's those small little movements that you want to make.
Yeah. So our next question, and then we'll kind of wrap it up, but our next question is about a common drug that we love to hate, but it's about prednisone. And so taking high doses of prednisone, especially with a flare-up, do you have recommendations for a habit system that allows for gradual increasing as flares subside?
I can start with that one, I guess. Yeah. So I think, and probably be probably decreasing, as flares subside, so you can sort of get back off. And I guess first of all, you want to try to work with your doctor on this so that you're both aware of what you're taking. That being said, I'll say that I know patients know best what prednisone does for them, and they're often good at guiding their own dose, So I hope many physicians do this, is that you work together and think about what the best dose is. As you referenced, with medication we love to hate, is that it does have a lot of side effects, and you want to try to take as little as you need. The other flip side of it, though, is it's one of our fastest, most effective medicines in getting people moving again. So I guess like many things in life, it's a double-edged sword. So you really want to kind of work together, but pay attention to your body, because you'll be able to find which doses really kind of work the best for you. I'll admit that there's no fancy calculator we can use in the doctor's office that gives us the perfect answer for everyone. Everybody's body is different. So we take our best shot as physicians, and then the patient tunes in and see how it's going. And ideally, you kind kind of work at it together to find the minimum dose that really takes care of things. And I think in the online medical system now, that's one benefit is it's not too hard to shoot a quick note through a lot of the electronic medical records we have and say, okay, I've been feeling really good for the last couple of days. Can I come down early? Like I was supposed to take this dose for the next week, but I'm really already feeling good. Could I come down a milligram or two? Something like that can help. I think that communication can help tailor it. So yeah, and it's difficult because if you take high doses for a flare, a lot of times you're pretty wired. It just happens. I mean, it's a part of the medicine, but then you also don't sleep as well, and there's sort of a crash period that can come too. So that can be difficult when you have to take high doses for a flare up. The more moderate doses usually don't do that, but each thing, and I think it's important to both patient and physician kind of keep focused on the idea that in the long run, it's bad for your bones and your cardiovascular health and a lot of other things. And so you kind of want to picture it as a decreasing the total amount you have to take over time. And so, I guess I'll just end by encouraging you, if you're a patient or you have to take this, that more feedback is better than less as far as how it's going, because it's really, your symptoms best, and you'll be able to tell which doses are helping and which ones aren't. And then you can really kind of tailor it to what your body needs.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you all again to all of our speakers, Tiffany, Dr. Niewold, and Denise, for sharing your time and wisdom today. I hope everyone here feels a little more confident in building supportive habits that will work with your life. And thank you also again to Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine for making this conversation possible, and their generous support of the Arthritis and Lupus Awareness Month at ANRF. If you'd like to revisit this conversation or share it with someone else, the recording will be available soon on our website at curearthritis.org. And we encourage you to follow us at Cure Arthritis on all platforms, where we'll be sharing more stories and tools all month long. We're so grateful that you were here today and a part of this community. Your curiosity and engagement and resilience are what make this all work. Thank you all.